have a diagnosis of vascular dementia, but I still enjoy life and my independence.
I have a diagnosis of Korsakoff dementia, but I'm still an individual person. I still want to be treated as an individual. I still want to be treated as a person.
I have a diagnosis of dementia and I enjoy life and I am still doing my yoga and my art.
I live on my own here. I have done for about 25 years. And I really love it. I love the peace and quiet of living in the country. Okay, so I've got dementia now, and that means that I can't do certain things. But that's just something that I live with. No point in feeling sorry for yourself. I still have a social life and I have a family, you know, but although the family live in East Kilbride, I spend a lot of time visiting them and spending time with them, socialising with them.
So I'm returning to Inverness, and a bus from Inverness to Glasgow and a bus from Glasgow to East Kilbride to come and look after our children. I think you've changed since the diagnosis in terms of you've become a lot more active and it's made you change your lifestyle to a certain extent.
Definitely.
And through changing your lifestyle you've met more people. Mm-hmm. Get rid of the stereotypical images they have of people with dementia and how dementia affects people, because it affects everybody differently.
I've got a diagnosis of dementia and I like a challenge. Each day is a fascination. I've always been interested in art and I've become fascinated by a particular art form which I keep experimenting with.
I've got different things on every day. In fact, by the end of the day, I'm quite tired when I think about it. I love crosswords because, again, you're using your mind. Sometimes I get it finished, sometimes I don't. I enjoy that very much. Always have done. These are my bowls that I got from my sister-in-law. It's something I've always wanted to do. I watched them play last Friday and it was great fun just watching them. So I said, I want to take part. So they've asked me to take part. I think it'll be good fun.
I've got Alzheimer's and it stopped me for one or two things, but I can still go out and enjoy myself. To be 50 years married shortly.
Yes.
Yeah.
In July.
50 years in July. Mm-hmm. So I reckon we'll trade them in then. Because I'm still young. I've made a lot of speeches and to doctors and to universities and nurses. So I was very pleased with myself being able to help things like that, you know, help somebody else that's got to kind of speak up for themselves.
I was surprised. I mean, the people who was sitting there and listening to Helen. Okay. It was fantastic.
Well, the history of Margaret and Alzheimer's and myself goes back approximately 4.5 years. First noted by my daughter, because being with Margaret most of the time, you get used to her little follicles, her little extraordinary pieces of information and forgetfulness. You put it down to, as Terry Wogan said, a senior moment. We have quite a good community here. We're a community association. They look after each other and they all know each other. If you don't know them, they know you. I've told all the neighbours, I've told anybody that meets Margaret. At first Margaret got annoyed because I told them, but now she's quite happy with it. And they look out for her. And as I said down in the harbour recently, she went down there on her own and somebody in the harbour said, does Hugh know you're out on your own? Aye. So he came back rather annoyed about that, but still.
Aye, because it was one of the kids that said it.
I realised that things were changing when my husband Andrew, his behaviour started changing. I also realised he wasn't telling it as it actually was. For example, he would tell me that he'd been home all day working in the garden when I had seen him at a bus stop in another town as I was passing through. So I knew that he was doing one set of things, whereas he was forgetting that he'd actually done that and just making up and telling me what he had done.
The first time we felt was when my husband had gone to get our granddaughter, but he forgot to do it that week. He had gone to get her, but forgot. That's how it was. That's how we came to know.
Once I got to the police station, I found that my dad was disoriented and he looked worried. and he didn't know where he was, so I put him in the car, brought him back. I think I yelled at him.
Yeah,
because I feel bad now because I didn't know what was going on. We just thought he generally forgot.
I did go into depression. I was on medication for that because, I don't know, you just seem to close down. And I don't know why, just things. I think you're worried in case you say something silly, because sometimes when people speak, you're not taken in certain ways.
It was horrific. It was like a big black hole because you didn't, and then I thought I was coming to terms with it, and then other things were getting thrown at me, other symptoms were coming, and I was discovering something else I couldn't do. And I was living on my own, and I was getting jolted and thinking, why can't I do this? And then I was trying to do it, and I was always trying to be the person I was before.
I wasn't able to accept it. Really, I just could not accept it. In fact, for the first, I would say, 2 years, I thought, this is just silly. It's not me. I couldn't possibly have it. No way, you know. It's old people that have it, not anybody of my age.
I think that the major benefit of getting an early diagnosis would be to help the person who has the diagnosis understand what dementia is all about and understand what support there is for him and that there are many other people who have dementia as well. I think that would be a huge plus.
Receiving a diagnosis for my mum was actually hugely helpful because we didn't know what was wrong up until that point. So in communication with our GP, it overwhelmed my dad because he knew that his wife of 50 years was changing and didn't know why she was changing. So once you find out what the diagnosis is and what it means you can get the appropriate help and advice.
The
diagnosis of dementia was important. It made me understand that it's not the same as a stroke, and the symptoms are different. It is a completely different illness which will get worse. I've realised that with time, no matter what I do, my father's behaviour will get worse. So I shouldn't feel guilty that I'm damaging my father's health. Instead, I'll know how to behave and will simply look for ways to slow down or distance myself and understand his changing behaviour.
Będę miał świadomość, że mam tak postępować i po prostu szukać sposobów spowolnienia czy inaczej podchodzenia z dystansem, ze zrozumieniem jego coraz innych zachowań.
I think in those early stages it is so important for both the person who is diagnosed with dementia as well as the carer to be given adequate information so that you understand that this is an illness and that there are ways to cope with it, that you don't have to be on your own. One of the positives in all of this is that Andrew maintained his interest in photography. And in the early days of his diagnosis, in fact, I used to encourage him to go out and do more and more photography. We got him a digital camera, and although he can't always focus and can't always do it properly, out of 500 digital pictures, he sometimes gets absolutely brilliant photography to the point that he has even entered photographs into competitions and won them. So there are certainly things he can do, and what we try to do is to celebrate what he can do rather than always focus on what he can't do. And photography certainly is one of the things that he does wonderfully.
Dementia is an umbrella term. There are many different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is probably the best known one. There's also vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and a whole range of other dementias that are less well known. What all the different kinds of dementia have in common is that they damage and kill brain cells, and so they affect the way that your brain works. Dementia is progressive, but the way it progresses is different for every person. It depends what kind of dementia you've got, and it also depends on you and how that dementia affects you. For most people, with most sorts of dementia, it'll tend to be your memory that's affected first. Remembering to do things, remembering where things are, that kind of thing. Sometimes finding words. Gradually, as the dementia progresses, other things get more difficult. So coping with everyday activities like cooking or shopping or making a cup of tea even will gradually get harder to do. The important thing to remember though if you've got dementia is to keep on doing what you can do. And there's a lot of things that you can do even if your memory's not very good that you can carry on doing. There are now drug treatments available for some kinds of dementia, particularly for Alzheimer's disease, and they may help some other sorts of dementia as well. Unfortunately, they're not cures and they don't help everybody who tries them, but ask your doctor about whether they'd be suitable for you. Dementia gets more common with age. It's quite rare in people under 65. In fact, there's only a couple of thousand people in Scotland who are under 65 with dementia. It gets more common in older age groups, so about 1 in 4 people over 85 have dementia. But whatever age you are, it's still an illness. It's not a natural consequence of old age. One group of people who unfortunately get dementia sometimes earlier is people with Down syndrome, who quite often develop dementia perhaps in their 40s or their 50s, which is unusually young. Obviously, getting diagnosis of dementia is often a great shock to people, and it's important to get some support after that. You can talk to your GP about who can help you. You can call the Dementia Helpline on 0808 808 3000, and that's there 24 hours a day, and they can tell you who's in your area that can help. The important thing to remember if you've got a diagnosis of dementia is you're not on your own with that. There are many other people with dementia out there. There are also lots of families of people with dementia. And if you can get together with some of those people, you'll probably find it very helpful. You're not alone. There's lots of support you can get. Just ask.
I've got a note in front of my hob. Think your task through step 1 to the end and keep focused, because my greatest problem was I'd start to cook, go away, and then it would be the smoke alarm that would inform me that I had stopped cooking. If I leave my tap running, there's nothing to stop it, it'll just run away. It won't overflow because there's no stopping in it. It causes a laugh, people who come in to use my toilet, they'll say, "Do not tell me you do not know how to use the shower." Well, I think what people don't understand is you've got to think. You have to think every step and break it down through. And if you forget to think and do it that way, that's when you make mistakes. I have my telephone prompts because I couldn't remember how to answer my phone. Answering the phone in writing is a bit much for me because it's 2 things. Writing is a problem for me, but to talk and write doesn't work for me. So that's when I say, hold on a moment, can you spell that? And then I put the phone down and write it down and then go back. And then I say to them, is this what you've just said? And repeat back, back to them so that they know that that's what I've heard. Because sometimes people are saying things to me and I hear not what they're saying. So I don't know why that is, but that's what it is. And I found that that works for me. I check all my rooms. I make sure the doors are closed, that the windows are closed, that my lights are off, that my mobile phone, that I have it with me, and my purse or money so that I can always get my way back or get a taxi home. My RSET so that if anything happens I always can have my RSET, and at the end I have a big smiley face saying sense of humour.
It affects every facet of your body, from your sense of touch, your depth of field, your vision. I've seen me cutting things and looking a bit closer and banging my head off the chopping board. So, I mean, I use my hand to judge distance. I actually touch things before I look down because I can physically feel the surface itself. And I know not to go beyond my hand. And it seems to work for me. I'm sure other people will find their own routine of solving that problem.
After my diagnosis, I voluntarily stopped driving because my psychiatrist says don't drive. But then, once I got medication and began to get my self-confidence back, I thought, I can still drive. So that's when I applied to sit the test. It took me months, but once I sat the test and was given a licence for 3 years, I drove for 3 years quite safely. I made sure I didn't drive for long periods. I didn't tire myself out. I think that was dangerous for me. And because at night time everything looks different, I didn't drive at night time. So I think I kept myself safe that way. I drove in ideal conditions.
The history booklet that was made by one of these social workers to come up and ask, can I see Jean for 2 hours a day or something like that and ask her questions with me not being there. I said, okay, doke. And through all this, I've learnt more about my own wife after being married for over 50 years, about some of the wee things. It was just unbelievable. And it developed. I ended up with a history of my wife. And it really, if she ever went to hospital, everything's all there for her, i.e. for the hospital, food, stuff she likes and dislikes, and her whole age, her whole history's in this wee pamphlet, and it's fantastic.
One of the things that really helped our family was maintaining that sense of routine, and my children used to go back to my parents' house after school. So what we did was we bought a weekly planner and we wrote down what was for dinner every night in each of the days. And then we wrote a shopping list and we wrote down the name of the shop where they would go to buy the items that they needed to cook, and we kept things simple. Sometimes we would just buy things to put in the oven and we would write out the instructions, the number of the oven that needed to be at to heat the food up. Sense of routine as well. My mum and dad used to go to church every week and we made sure that kept up as well. Nobody knew what was wrong because Alzheimer's and dementia is invisible to other people. So maintaining that sense of normality and routine is crucially important.
What can I advise people who find out that someone close to them has dementia? To be honest, the most important thing is to distance yourself from the situation. You should learn to understand the situation. This ill person in front of you does not want to annoy you, is not negative towards you. These are simply the changes caused by the illness, which you have to accept, and help them with their understanding. Sometimes they might feel lost, forget things. They might not be able to control their reactions, and sometimes might not even know who they are talking to.
If you meet a deaf person and you think that they may have dementia, or they have been diagnosed with dementia, what support can be provided. It is important they have the support of a BSL interpreter. If you are unsure of what other support is available, contact your local deaf organisations.
I would say the main thing is always keep yourself positive. Just be positive, be patient, and that will take you through whatever difficulty is. 如果有機會咧，就最好咧就去做啲運動。運動咧就係最好幫助你消除嗰啲唔開心嘅嘢嘅。
James did get a companion card for use on the buses, which is a disabled person's card, but it allows him to have a companion with him, and you don't pay for either on the buses anywhere in Scotland.
If you don't have your licence, some places in Scotland do have a taxi scheme whereby you can get a discount if you've lost your licence.
I only knew of this about a month ago, but it's something that people could actually use, have this card on them, and it says, I have an illness called dementia. I would appreciate your help and understand. I think this is perfect, and it's got phone numbers, and you can actually put your name inside as well.
I'm a regular customer at Greg's, and maybe I'd go in and buy something that would say 87p, I'd give them money, and I'd say 87p, I'd give them more money, and they would go 87p. And I think they were starting to look round to think, no, was this some sort of a trick I was playing? Was it on candid camera? And so it was getting embarrassing because I would say, I've got dementia. And they would say, what? I've got dementia. What? I've got dementia. And people in the queue could hear people behind you, but you could hear. So I thought, I need a card so I could tell people quickly and discreetly I'm having problems, so they'll take their time with me.
When I'm under stress, that's when my speech will go. When I forget to take my water and hydrate myself, then you see the old, at the beginning where the diagnosis, you see that all creeping back. It's as if you've got to keep a fine controlled, thing way on it. But it doesn't work for everybody. Everybody is different in their dementia, and there's some people that have dementia that it affects their speech.
My speech sometimes is getting slightly, it's sometimes, some days it's not all that great. My writing can be a little bit difficult, especially on the Christmas cards. So I've started them ages ago so I can get those done. Some days I can't write. I know it goes squiggly. I know that I'm not writing properly. And I've just got to stop and start again.
Bardzo ważną kwestią.
It was very important to me that when I went to see the psychologist, a language interpreter was there too. People learn another language which they use in everyday life, but have no opportunity to learn professional vocabulary and terms. Sometimes not only words, but even sentences. If the language interpreter wasn't there with me, I wouldn't have been able to cope and understand what's happening with my father, how to behave and solve the problems with my father's dementia and our future life together.
Ojca demencji I naszego wspólnego działania.
I went on a course about dementia. Okay, guy at 75 years away got on the course, but it was pretty interesting. It took the pressure off me when I ended up with groups of people. And there was a person, Professor Jim Kirkwood. It was fantastic because you think this happening, it's only happening to you. Oh, there's the anger, the frustration, really everything hits you. But I went to a group meeting every Saturday morning for about 3 or 4 months, and that was fantastic. Not only did it pressure off myself, but I realised what I could do to help my wife.
The best advice that I got from Alzheimer's Scotland in those very early days was to get a power of attorney. And fortunately at that time, Andrew also understood the importance of it because it was so early on. And of course we went off and got this power of attorney, Andrew quite believing that it would never be used. And that's why he was so happy to do it. His logic told him it was the correct thing, that if it was ever needed, I would have it in place.
The benefits I've found from raising a power of attorney is that I can contact the medical staff and financial staff of my wife's affairs without any problems. Otherwise, I'd have to go through a lot of rigmarole. I also believe that by getting in early with the power of attorney, this has helped me. And I discovered there were two types. The one was a continuing power, which is to do with your material things, and the welfare type, which is all the medicines and medical attention. So if you're in this situation, get your power of attorney early, and also remember the two types, continuing power and welfare power.
My life took a total turnaround, because I went into this working group and everyone was sitting around the table and they were laughing and they were discussing and there was an agenda. And I was thinking, well, where's the people with dementia? And someone said, but they are the people with dementia. And I thought, they can't be. I could hardly string, as I say, words together.
We had a good turnout for the World Alzheimer's Day lecture. Agnes and I spoke about the work of the Scottish Dementia Working Group and about the Charter of Rights.
The Scottish Dementia Working Group loved me better. They encouraged me. They taught me how to live again.
We start to give people their life back.
I knew that because
I need a rest. We can make them laugh and make them feel cared about. People are interested in as a person, not as a diagnosis. It's like the university for people with bad memories. And they suddenly realise, wait a minute, we're a slight wee bit of tweaking. We can actually create a whole new life around us.
There are a number of organisations that you can go to for support. For example, Alzheimer's Scotland Action on Dementia or the National Dementia Helpline. For minority ethnic communities, there are also organisations that you can approach in your local area, which can provide support both to the carer and the person in receipt of care. If they're not able to help you directly, they will be able to refer you on.
Fortunately, our family doctor had sent a CPN who visited us every 2 weeks, and she used to work with Andrew, but she was an extraordinary woman and she worked with me as well. I didn't even realise she was, because she listened to me. And when Andrew was telling her things, I would either do this or do this, and she would realise whether he was remembering it as it was. So by listening to me as well as to Andrew, she was able to understand what was happening with him, and so could help me a huge amount. And in fact, she was the person who, when things really got very difficult, she was the one who said, here's the phone number for Alzheimer's Scotland, now call them.
Alzheimer's Scotland has a range of services for people with a diagnosis of dementia and their carers. We have a 24-hour helpline, which is free phone and confidential, and none of the content of calls is discussed with anybody without the caller's permission. We have traditional daycare services for people who want to engage with that, and there's also home support services where a support worker will come out and visit people in their own homes and help them to carry on doing some of the activities that they enjoy doing. There's also befriending groups available. And again, a befriender can be matched up with a person with dementia and meet with them on a more informal basis. So there's a wide range of services available throughout the country. Not all areas have the same services, and if you want information about the services, then you can get that from the free phone dementia helpline.
I get stressed and my family helps me a lot. A home help told me, "You need to get out of the house, go to Deaf Connections." This helps me because I am deaf. I go to play chess, which I love. It helps me to rest and relax.
In those early days, the only support that I had was Alzheimer's Scotland. I have a one-on-one support lady that I can speak with. But we also developed an email group, because drop-in cafes and support groups, carer support groups, which I think in the big cities are very successful, we were just too isolated and too far away from everything. So the main support that I have up there now as a carer is that I have a one-on-one support lady from Alzheimer's Scotland that I can call on any time I need to speak with her. And there's also an email group of people with husbands, wives or parents who have similar kinds of diagnoses. So we can talk to each other, which is actually quite good, because you can wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, how am I going to deal with this? And you can get on the email and talk to people. So it's very good.
Alzheimer's Scotland has also set up dementia cafes in many parts of Scotland. And these are informal cafe-type meetings where people can come along, carers can come, people with dementia can come, and they can meet together and have a cup of coffee or tea, have a good chat, meet other folks who are in a similar situation to themselves, and also to learn a bit more about their illness.
When I first got the diagnosis, I was very upset, but I have learned and I have found out that there is life after dementia.